Welcome, everyone. I'm so delighted that you've made your way to this webinar. And we have folks joining us on a Zoom meeting and those on Facebook Live. Welcome. My name is Caron Daley. I am the Repertoire and Resources Chair for Collegiate level choirs with ACDA. And it's my distinct pleasure to be moderating this event this afternoon, Forging a Career Path. This is a topic of particular interest to me, and I was really excited to think about how we could showcase the very many ways that people are involved in choral music in this particular event. This topic, I think, is particularly important right now as we've come through in a period of incredible turbulence in our field. Many people have navigated new pathways in choral music. Certainly, I think everyone has exercised incredible creativity and innovation in the choral activities that they maybe were already doing. And perhaps some people are thinking about new ways to engage in choral music as we sort of move forward. Students, those of you who are joining us today, we're very glad that you're here. And I hope today's conversation will open to you a broad array of possibilities for a career in choral music. Also knowing that the field has certainly changed through this pandemic experience. So I invite you to ask questions through our session today. You can do that through the chat function, and we will also have a dedicated time for questions at the end of today's session. But without further ado, I'm delighted to present our panel, and I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about what they do, and we'll begin with Ahmed.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. So my name is Ahmed Anzaldúa. I am originally from Mexico and I live in St. Paul, Minnesota. I am Director of Music Ministries at Unity Church Unitarian, where I have 4 adult choirs and 3 children's choirs. It's a full-time job. And I started a professional ensemble when I was in school called Border Crossing. That was 5 years ago, and now we are a mid-sized arts organization. We have several ensembles, lots of programming. Our first album is coming out with Bridge Records next month. And we've got some collaborations with coming up with Sphinx Orchestra in a couple of weeks. So it's been wonderful with Border Crossing. And I'm also one of the editors of the Justice Choir Songbook, together with Tesfa and Abby Bettinas. So those are sort of my main areas of concentration in choral music.
Good afternoon or good evening. My name is Anthony E. Arnold, and I'm over here in California. It's my 27th year of teaching music, and I started 7 years in the private Christian schools, 2 years in Chicago, and then 5 years at a Christian school in Northern California in the Bay Area. And then my last 20 years have been at Miller Middle School. And in all of my 27 years of experience, I've taught instrumental and music appreciation. And then 25 of the 27 years I've taught choir. So that's my background. And thanks for letting me be here today.
Hey, I'm Susan LaBarr, and I am the editor of Walton Music. And so I'm the choral editor there and work with all the composers who send in music and do all of the things involved with getting the music out and into the world. And then I am also on the side a composer of choral music.
A fantastic composer of choral music. My name is KellyAnn Nelson. I'm based here in Washington, D.C. I am the Associate Director of Development and work in fundraising here at Chorus America. But for the last 2 decades, I have served in a number of different roles. I taught middle school and high school choir. I worked with 3 community children's choral organizations, both as artistic and administrative directors. years with the Cincinnati Boy Choir, the Cincinnati Youth Choir, and the Princeton Girl Choir. I taught vocal jazz group at a university. I also started my own organization in Cincinnati, was the founding artistic director of the Young Professionals Choral Collective, and led that organization through spring 2020, when I handed over the reins, and have had the opportunity now to work in a fully administrative role here at Chorus America. I was a Chorus America member for many years, used their services, and I'm really excited to be leaning into this opportunity to sort of support the choral field. Additionally, I am the parent of a 5-year-old and 8-year-old mermaid scientist, something wonderful humans. And my husband is also a choral conductor, reformed into executive director of the Cathedral Choral Society at the National Cathedral. So lots of choral geekery everywhere.
I like that word geekery. That's great, Kellyanne. Thank you, panelists. You represent such a broad swath of experience and also job activities. So it's just going to be great to hear more about the work that you're doing. We'll start with our first question to all of you, which is, what educational experiences were especially important in preparing you for the career you have today? And we'll start with Susan.
Yeah, so when I was in college, I didn't know that there was such a thing as being an editor at a music publishing company. I knew I sang in choir and I had music in my hands, but I didn't ever think about where that came from, and maybe other than that a composer wrote the song. So in my university experience, I was studying piano first, and then decided I didn't want to study piano anymore. I didn't want to be a professional pianist. And so I just got a really general music degree, a Bachelor of Arts in music. And throughout all of that time, I studied, of course, music theory, ear training, and took piano lessons that whole time. And I mean, thank goodness for all of that. That is absolutely what I would say is needed if you're interested in working for a publisher, especially in an editorial role, is to have all those basics, have the foundation just as solid as could possibly be. And probably the rest of the panelists will say the same thing about those classes. Then next, a lot of choral singing for what I do as a composer and as an editor, just having that experience of what it feels like to be in a choir from early on through even now. I think it's really important not only just to understand how the different vocal lines work together, to learn about the ranges of each vocal part, but to sing a lot of music and to get an idea of, wow, that was really fun to sing, or that was really hard to sing and I did not like singing that. Why is that? So just experiencing in real time what it is to sing something with a choir, that informs certainly my composing and how I look at music as well. And then in college, also an in-depth study of choral arranging and composition. I wasn't a composition major, but I did have a few of those classes. So even if you're not a composition major, but are interested in editing or composing, taking a few classes like that are really great. I think we go to Ahmed next.
Well, for me, I think that the single, maybe most important class I took during all my schooling was a class in nonprofit management leadership. I mean, I took all the classes in music school, the theory, practice piano, practice singing, and that's essential. But I honestly was very frustrated in that I didn't know how to make my projects happen, how to get on a concert series, how to be able to pay musicians to sing in an ensemble I was conducting, you know, all that sort of stuff. And I just, out of curiosity, I had some credits left over in my master's hours and my master's assistantship. And I signed up for a class in the College of Arts and Cultural Leadership at my college. And it was just a class that's filled with like museum directors and fundraisers and that sort of thing. And a whole semester of learning how to write a grant application, how to manage donations, how to keep track of the different funding models, organizations, and being able to see how the business side of music works from the other end, but in our world, which is so much about nonprofits. That was immensely helpful. And I recommend that to every student that I know has a goal of wanting to become a performer, because we are at a point where sometimes we go into school to conduct or to sing or to play an instrument, thinking that if we're good enough, magically we'll get discovered and we'll win a competition and but no, those are things that happen through connections and through knowing how things work. And a lot of that is really about fundraising. A lot of that is about having a compelling idea and knowing who to take that idea to and how to present it. And all of that is stuff that people learn at school and study. And if you can't learn it at school and take a course on it, you can read about it. There's wonderful books written about that. And it's odd because I think that many of us as choral musicians and professionals and educators, it's not that we have like an entry level knowledge of it. We have like a baby's knowledge of it, like a toddler level knowledge of it. So just having the very basic understanding of how does this work? How do these organizations work? How does it happen so that I can conduct that ensemble I want to conduct, or I can present this program I want to present, or I want to publish the thing I want to publish? It's just an important thing in learning how things work. And just as an aside, I mean, if I had to pick like the most important educational experience, I was a pianist. I'm still a pianist. 10 years ago, I didn't know that I wanted to be in choral music at all. I was the accompanist for the choirs at my school, and all the choir directors went to ACDA for a week and left me in charge because there was no one in the choral faculty there. And when they came back, I was like the new person of the choral faculty. I loved it so much. So just having that opportunity to switch careers and figure out that this is what I really wanted to do, that was also pretty great. I think KellyAnn is next.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just highlight so much of what Ahmed just said. I think that is so, that ability to sort of get that baseline understanding of sort of the business, whether it is for a nonprofit or for your school program or whatever, is really impactful. And I will say, as somebody who, when I saw that this question was about education, I was like, I could talk about all my degrees, but they're all in music education and arm waving. And I'm really grateful for those degrees. But I think that so much of what I have learned has been through experience and the hustle. I'm a nerd and I'm also a parent. And so when I was thinking about this, I started thinking about this book that Mo Willems wrote. If anybody, it's called Because. And it's the story of a girl who, because her uncle gets sick, she gets a ticket to a concert and ends up becoming the conductor because of each of these moments. And I started going through my own because, and I was like, because I sang in my state honors choir and was inspired by Eve Ely, I knew I wanted to become a singer. And then when I went to music school, and because they forced me to figure out how to teach 5 Little Speckled Frogs to first graders, I fell in love with the process of music education and, made that a major part of my career. And because I discovered in the classroom this love for engaging students, oftentimes students who weren't seen as successful in other areas in math and whatever, and I could advocate by being a choir director, and I could plan creative opportunities or events and all of this within the classroom, I started getting this interest in sort of the administration of my program, and I started serving the Michigan School Vocal Music Association board. I started getting interested in that sort of association work. And because I was doing that, I had this opportunity to take my choral education skills into the community setting and really discovered a passion for mission-driven music education and conducting and program management. And so started learning things like strategic planning and how to function with a board and, all of these things. And I didn't have an undergrad program in which I was learning about nonprofit management. Like, I probably wouldn't have signed up for the class anyways. I didn't know that it was something that would be so interesting, but I was writing grants even as a public school teacher to get new risers for my classroom and advocate, right? And so I went into the community. I started doing this mission-driven work. I started learning how a nonprofit worked. I really got interested in the ways that I could build relationships and showcase the strength and power of choral music in the community in that space. And then because I come from a family of hustlers and I watched my, dad start his own business and be entrepreneurial and, have a family that encouraged that, I was able to start my own organization. And again, these weren't codified skills, but I had to learn how to read a profit and loss statement while also preparing my scores and trying to think about recruitment and marketing and all of those pieces. And so it was really exciting to be in a space where I could wave my arms, but also think thematically and community impactfully, if that's the way to use that word. And now, because of all of that, I'm able to be in a space that is not directly related to where I started out, but has sort of synthesized all of these different pieces where I'm now raising the funds to support advocacy and research and tools and programs that are relevant and support choral leaders throughout North America, especially at a time like right now when we're all moving through the pandemic and reinventing ourselves minute by minute. And so I have the opportunity to be in this space right now. So I would say that I don't have a good list of like educational experiences. I had a brilliant and wonderful education, but my education has continued as I've continually evolved and learned and pivoted along each of those little moments. So also, Mo Willems' book is great.
So I get to go last on this one. I think just a little nugget here from the last two speakers. I have always taught in affluent places. So I've never had to deal with the fundraising aspect of things. And I think with our last two speakers, it's important to highlight that you never know where you're going as far as your career path is. And what they just said, I think is really important, because I've had colleagues who have gone into school districts who haven't had to do those things of fundraising and advocacy and even maxing out their own credit cards because they wanted the kid to have these amazing experiences, but then no funding for it. So how do you go about doing that? I think is really important to highlight. From my educational experiences, I'm be really, really honest with you. My alma mater, I feel, did not prepare me as well going into my first year of teaching. And so I just have this mindset of I want to get it right at all costs. And so I just asked a lot of questions from colleagues and people who had programs that were just amazing, and doing ACDA or doing CMEA, for me, California Music Educators Association, and was having colleagues and contacts that I can aspire to, which in the 20 of my 27 years allowed me to the opportunity to have my own choir sing at a national conference. That was honestly me working harder and not smarter. And so from an educational experience, after that national conference experience, I actually started at Holy Names University in Oakland, California, where I started learning the Kadai method. And literally these 70 and 80-year-old women in my Kadai training in me doing 20 years of harder and not smarter, they literally handed me my rear end because they taught me that I knew this much about music, and there's so much. So the main things that I got out of that was sequencing. And the reason why the sequencing is so important is because you can go backwards in how a child is learning the music and pinpoint exactly where their weaknesses are, and then help them through that. So in the Kadai sequencing, they have the beat first, rhythm is second, and they have their own method of rhythm teaching. I found that Takadimi works the best for that. And then when you're learning melody, there's a whole sequence to that that is solfege based. And something I forgot to mention about rhythm, when they're learning the rhythm through Takadimi, it's also important to incorporate the words to that as well, so that you can start doing rhythmic things along with the words, so then you can help with the diction and enunciation of things. But what mostly with the sequencing, what the Kadai method does is it teaches whole body learning. And so I think it's really, really important. It's one thing to teach the students like thinking wise, but it's also to teach the music body wise. And if they can bridge the gap between the two, where the experience is both cognitive and experience, then I think that's what makes transformative learning, so that it's just not, I think I know, but they really, really know. So that's been my educational experience.
Thank you, all of you. It's so inspiring to learn about lifelong learning and the various things that have come along for you as you've pursued your paths. So thanks for explaining those. I agree with the whole body learning thing, Anthony. So we'll go on to our next question, which relates to your skills or attitudes. And by skills, I'm thinking more like your personal skills and attitudes, or musical or administrative, that you've developed since your formal education. And some of you have talked about this already, to meet the needs of your work. Or perhaps you might also include anything about since the onset of the pandemic. Have you developed new skills and attitudes since that time? So we'll start this time with KellyAnn.
Yeah, I think that one of the skills that has served both me personally, through the lens of that question, but that I'm also seeing and hearing from the field is so important and becoming more and more important, is the ability to storytell. I know as a teacher in the classroom, it was my job to make sure that I was telling the story in a way that was engaging to my students, to bring them to the table, to learn a piece of music, to learn about a person, a time in history, a cultural moment, a whatever. It was important as a person who was interested in attracting audiences, that I was able to tell stories, from a marketing perspective, to get people into the room, as well as, writing grants and telling stories to funders about why, their support would be helpful to bring things forward. And I think that, right now in the choral field, there are all these different ways that storytelling is so important. And I think that we're learning new ways to tell stories logistically, right? Because now digital is also leading to digital overwhelm. And we are sitting here on Zoom, which was not something we did 2 years ago. And we're learning new technologies, and we're finding new ways to tell stories. But I also think that we're thinking about, sort of relevance, being relevant in a new way, and making sure that we aren't just saying the story is, this is music and you should hear it. We're talking more and becoming part of the fabric of society in a way that's really impactful. This is why we have programmed this piece of music, because we believe in, or we think this is impactful, or, and I think that those stories make a difference. I would also say, wearing my Chorus America hat, being able to take data and use that as stories that help us advocate for our place in the community, especially when we've been silent for, you know, a while. Things like Chorus America has a chorus impact study, which shows facts and figures about the health of our singers being better as they age, that singers who sing in choruses are more likely to vote and have engagement within their communities. Those kinds of numbers tell stories for funders, for supporters, for engagement, right? We also, Chorus America has an initiative that launched this fall called Rediscover Harmony, which is a website that is just filled with advocacy tools to, you know, advocate for choral music, to connect with other choruses in your area. It's also got a really fantastic tool where you can make your own choral compositions with pictures of singers from like all 50 states, like the blob thing that Google did a while ago. So again, geekery, because this is where I live, but finding new ways to advocate, to tell stories, to draw people in, I think is going to be, it continues to be, you know, just really important. You know, I am also right now interested in engaging donors into sort of the culture of philanthropy so that they can in turn support programs that are being built, to support those of us who didn't get the nonprofit management class and maybe wanted to take an online Chorus Management Institute course at Chorus America, tooting horns, things like that. But, you know, to be able to make sure that my donors understand, you know, what it is that they're supporting. So I think that ability to tell stories, to use the skills that we're using, you know, in the classroom, in the concert hall, you know, and also to make people feel welcome using those stories, that you don't have to show up knowing about music because that's what real musicians do, but being able to say, wherever you are in your musical journey, this is the experience you're going to have. So I just, as you know, I look at that skill set, I think that storytelling has been really impactful to me. And it's something special that choral artists, no matter what area of the field we're working in, it's something that choral people have as a special gift, the words, the ability to tell those stories. So.
Yeah, I'll go next. So I kind of loop my answer into a couple of different sections, and the first is practical. I never thought when I was in college that I would be doing sales or marketing or graphic design or any of those things. And now that's what I do a lot of the time. Just today I was, all day today I've been working in design to put together our next marketing piece that we'll send out to thousands and thousands of conductors all over the world. And luckily it's something I really enjoy. But if I could go back to those days, and if there's any advice I could give, it's to look at the business classes that are offered and find ones that sound interesting to you. If you can take a class in sales or marketing or negotiation or anything like that, it will come back to serve you no matter what you do in music. You will have times either as a teacher or as a performer or all the other things. You'll have times where you have to negotiate or where you have to sell something or you have to fundraise and find money from somewhere. So yeah, I would go back and 100% take classes in that world and maybe even do a minor or some sort of degree in that world. I've also really gained a lot of conversation skills, which sounds a little bit silly, but just learning how to listen really well, how to look someone in the eye and not be worrying about what else is going on when you're having a conversation, you know, just really simple things like that, like really focusing in and listening, giving other people good time that they deserve in a conversation. It's so important. It sounds a little silly, but it's something I've actually really worked on, is just conversation skills. And I'm a pretty good people person, but still we can all get better at that. And then, yeah, I mentioned negotiation. Never thought that I would be, I see some of not only, you know, composers on here, but some composers I work with, and I use negotiation with composers sometimes, you know, just when we're talking about something particular within the music or just how it's going to be put out into the world. There's a lot that goes on there with composers, but then also with other music companies when we're looking at rights to texts or permission to use a song and make an arrangement or whatever it might be. There's a lot of that goes into the day-to-day at a publisher. I feel like this is a good place to mention this little piece. My husband and I are both musicians, and we have good jobs, but we're still musicians, and there's not a lot of money in this. Let's just all be honest here. So we decided really early on to invest in something outside of music, and that led us to real estate investing. So we have some rental properties and things like that we always have going on. And that's a huge skill that has developed over this time, is just giving yourself kind of a backup, or just a foundation, a nest, that you can pursue all of your musical endeavors while you still have money coming in from another source. So I would just say, as early as you possibly can, start investing, like not only saving your money, but learning about investing in whatever it might be. And that's a whole discussion for another day. And then just personally, I've really learned a lot about my own personality, and I found that to be really helpful. I've been out of college now for 20 years, I guess, and I've really, really grown since then as a person. And so just understanding myself and how I communicate and how my brain works and how I take information in, how I take criticism in, all of that stuff is really helpful in communicating with other people who I work with, or just who I cross paths with in a professional situation. I've also learned how to be more still and more silent. So that has, for me, included eliminating social media from my life, and using that time that I would have spent on that sort of thing to find some quiet and find some stillness. And that's really been helpful to me, to not just be kind of worrying about what the world is doing all the time, and looking inward a little bit more. So yeah, just honing those skills of listening and being still every once in a while, I think is important for us kind of now more than ever, So that's what I'll say. Next.
Thank you, Susan. So there's going in the public school world right now, especially in California, since our governor mandated this, the social emotional learning aspect of kids, especially during this pandemic, is something that I think is important to talk about, because I think before the governor passed this, it was something that I innately did, because it's just, I think, something that music encompasses, is that there's this social emotional component to it. I think 27 years of teaching middle school, especially, I feel is the age of the most influence that you can have. I call it the terrible twos revisited. And the reason why I call that, for those of you who've had kids in here, that during 2 years old they're developing a whole lot. And so, and one of the words that they develop just naturally is no, because they don't want to do anything. But it's the teeth, and then their teeth are coming in even more, and their brains are just firing like all over the place. And then for middle school, it kind of goes through that same process again. You have kids who come in, it's like, "Hi, Mr. Arnold." And then after Christmas break, it's like, "Hi, Mr. Arnold." And so how do you go about helping them with all those social emotional things, especially for middle schoolers, where psychologically they're faced with fears of how do others perceive me, and especially with teaching choir, they don't get to hide behind an instrument because they are the instrument. So how do you forge in their minds that it's okay to make mistakes? It doesn't define you as a person. One thing that I've learned throughout the pandemic is to take time for mindfulness and to explain to the kids about how their brains work. In the psychological field, they use these two terms. It's called the rider and the elephant. The elephant is the left or right side of our brain, which is our emotional side, and right side. And then the left side of our brain is our thinking, our critical thinking, our logic. And so a lot of times when we get emotional, what we don't know is that our thinking side actually shuts off. That's why they're even called crimes of passion, because they'll sit the criminal down covered in blood on his shirt, and it's like, you know, what happened? And they're like, I don't know, because that thinking side of their brain shuts off. And the reason why I bring this up is because kids, especially in middle school, they get super nervous when it comes to the performances that you have. And for me at a national conference, like, that's even scary for me. So how do you teach them to overcome those fears is, you tell them about the rider and the elephant, and you teach them about mindfulness. And mindfulness deals with the breathing, and this is a really big thing right now, where you want to take 2 breaths in through your nose and exhale out, because what happens when we're emotional, our heart rate actually increases, and we want to be able to slow down our heart rate because the brain needs that blood to kick in our emotions. But if we can slow down, we can keep on our thinking side. And so I incorporate 3 minutes of guided meditation with my students. And I started this during the pandemic because we just needed to take time to just be mindful and not get emotional, because there are a lot of things that are emotional right now. I mean, they just went through almost 2 years of not being around people. So if you can provide places in an atmosphere which is safe, but also cognitive of how their brains are developing, that it's okay to fail, we're going to get through this together, that social emotional learning for the students, and incorporate that meditation and the breathing. I found within the 27 years, especially within these last 2 years specifically, it's really, really important for these kids going forward.
I'll go last with this question. So Susan mentioned conversation, and I agree so much with that. I mean, the skill I think that has most developed since my formal education, they're the skills that in school people sort of look down on because they call them soft skills, you know, and they're not. They are probably the most important skills I have in my jobs as director of a mid-sized organization or a large music program at a church. So learning how to have a conversation with someone, how to listen with empathy, how to resolve conflict, how to receive and give feedback, how to have a right relationship with someone or the community, all of that, empathy, communication, relationship building, that is the job, at least for me. I mean, I can't do my job without the really firm foundation of musical knowledge and music history and music theory and all that. But as a director of a professional ensemble, you get so far in this career just by not being a jerk. I mean, there's so much toxicity in leadership in the professional choral world, and we hear news about it every day. And ultimately, especially when you're trying to start something, you're trying to convince these singers, convince all these musicians, hey, do you want to work with me? And people don't want to work with someone that has a history of toxicity, or that doesn't communicate clearly, or that has a reputation as being a sort of a jerk or worse. So for me, I think that after school, over the years, that was the most important skills those were the most important skills that I think I developed. And I think a big part of that is that once you get out of the school bubble, you start to realize that the people you are working with aren't people that are going to be gone in 2 years or 4 years. They're people that are going to build a life with. They're your colleagues that they're going to be with you for 15 or 20 years, or they're the people in your church congregation that they grow old with you and have kids, and you see their kids grow up, and you see their siblings go through your classroom. And or, there's this photographer or this graphic designer that you work with, this event. You build all these relationships as your career goes. And in my experience, learning how to maintain and nurture those relationships with people and being in bright relationship with people with community is how you build things over the long term. Otherwise, what I see happening, unfortunately, with some of my colleagues that maybe don't pay as much attention to that, is that they're caught in this sort of cycle of rebuilding, where they get to a certain point, people get sick of working with them, and then it crashes, and then they form a new circle, and then they start again, and then they get to a point, and then it sort of crashes, and they start again somewhere else. Or so I think that's important. And I also think that it's unfortunately sort of ingrained in the culture of classical music, where we sort of revere geniuses and masterworks and that sort of thing. So we look down on soft skills as somehow maybe you have to be a bit of a jerk to be a great artist or a great composer, which is not the case at all. I disagree with that so much. In terms of pandemic, I would say that the pandemic has really forced me to value my time better, value the time I have with my family, value the time that I have alone, value the time that I have with the people and the things I love in a way that I didn't before. I would say that before the pandemic, I had this sort of toxic urgency to do things more, quicker, faster, better. I took pride in the fact that I would reply to an email within minutes. Something happened like in the first year of the pandemic where Border Crossing's email server crashed without any of us knowing it. So we had no emails coming in for about 3 weeks. None of us knew it until we realized, like, oh my God, none of those emails have been arriving. For 3 weeks, we haven't replied to a single email. And we fixed it. And then going back, I realized that the emails that were actually important made it to me. They got to me through a phone call or through an alternate way or through a conversation when I saw someone at an event, or the information that actually needed to get to me did get to me on its own without me having to, chase it around. So that led to me sort of slowing down and really thinking about how I manage my time and how I manage expectations from others. Because not every request you get is equally important. And when you work in sort of marginalized areas of our field, so I work a lot with immigrants, immigrant culture, Latinx culture, you get a lot of requests for your time that are not necessarily things you want to pursue. And there's a quote from my aunt. Her name's Gloria Anzaldúa, and she's a well-known Chicana writer. And she wrote something that said that we are in danger of becoming purveyors of resource lists. If we just answer to everything, what we become is just this person that gives people resource lists, and we never get to the things that we actually want to do or need to do, or we sacrifice our time with our family, or my time practicing piano or studying scores or digging through a library for new music that I don't know. So I think the pandemic really hammered that in, that time is not unlimited and you have to treat it as a valuable resource.
Thank you, everyone. These are really inspirational answers. And thank you also for debunking myths. That's really powerful. I appreciate it. We'll move on to a question that maybe is a little bit lighter in a way. What do you enjoy most about your role, or how do you think about your impact in your role? And we'll start this off with Anthony.
You said that, and I don't know if my answer is going to be lighter, though. So forgive me. But I say what I enjoy the most, or I think the biggest impact for me is influencing my students, especially considering 20 years have been with middle school students. So I'm influencing their minds for change. And that change through two things that are really important to me, excellence and purpose. So another way you can think of purpose is know your why. Simon Sinek, if you've never heard of that book, you can go to a TED Talk or YouTube and type in his name, Simon Sinek, and why. And it's one of the top 5 TED Talks. And so he goes into this deep dive about why it's important to know your why. Because without why, then what's the point? And so from that, you gain purpose. And I think especially, even though my field and my love and my purpose is to teach music at a high level, I still want students to pursue everything that they can once they figured out their why, to do everything in excellence. And as Aristotle says, that excellence is habitual. My definition for excellence is actively striving to do the right thing all the time. And so I say those two things because obviously I have students, since I'm an elective, who leave, pursue other things like leadership, cooking, whatever. But if I can influence them about, okay, if you're pursuing your why, then do everything you can in excellence so that when you actually find your why, the goal, then you've already created that habit to going about that why. And a lot of them come back. I still have relationships, attended weddings. I'm a middle school teacher, but they still keep in contact with me because they remember that definition, like actively striving to do the right thing all the time. And they know that I care deeply because it wasn't about, you need to be in my class. It wasn't about numbers. It was about speaking to their heart and to their mind about, no, you take care of you first so that you can be the change that we need once you find out your why. I think has been, for me, the most important thing. I tell the kids that, I get an hour to brainwash you and I look forward to it. So that's how I look at it, and I go about my day every day. So I think KellyAnn is next.
Love it. Knowing the why, I think, is important. So when I met my husband, he said, what is your, you've done all these different things. What is it that your dream job would be? And I said, going to a choral conference every day. That would be my dream job, is building relationships with other choral nerds. That's my sweet spot. And now I work for an organization that puts on an annual conference every year. And I've worked for them for 2 years and still have not gotten to work at a conference because of the pandemic. So someday, in fact, June 15th is when I'm going to finally be at a live conference coming up for Chorus America. But that's, so my joy is that I get to now work supporting the field for an organization that I found as my support. I just believe so strongly in associations like ACDA and Chorus America and the way that they support all of the work that's going on in the choral field. It gives us the research and the advocacy tools that we need, but it also gives us a network. And we've spoken in a couple of different ways about the ability and the need for building relationships, whether that's finding mentors, whether that's finding colleagues, whether that's being inspired by, brilliant ideas, whether that's, finding new ways to remain relevant and move forward. I think, being part of these associations as members, I found highly valuable, and some of the most inspiring moments in my teaching, administrative, artistic leadership career as I progressed through. I needed that network and I needed those resources. And so now the fact that on a daily basis, I get to be in the room where it happens, when new programs are being developed, when I'm raising funds to help support new initiatives, with an organization that is interested in supporting so many different people across North America. Chorus America serves, over 7,000 members, mostly who work for independent choruses, but we have resources and opportunities that serve, the entire choral field. And to get to support these brilliant humans and to continue to engage in those relationships is a special part of my work that I do. Of course, if you ask my children what I do for a job, they say I'm a computer sitter. But basically it's because I am just constantly getting to talk to, people who are creating the music, selling the music, making the supplies, working, collaboratively with so many people in the choral field. So that is sort of the piece I enjoy the most, and it's exciting to be part of that impact. I'm looking here. Ahmed, I think you're next.
Yeah. Well, I'm a full-time church music director. That is my main job. And I'm lucky in that I work in a church where I agree with their mission and their ideals, even if I'm not particularly part of the church congregation. And I remember when I finished my doctorate, many of my colleagues were like, "You're nuts," because we sort of think that it's the college job. That's the one you should take, and fortunately I had some options and I went with the church job. And I love my church job because especially that connection between music and like decisive life moments and memory that people have. So many of us had our first exposure to a piano or to choral singing in church. We remember the music we heard at a wedding or at the memorial for someone we love. And every Sunday you get to put on a concert. And it's a concert that is tied to all these big ideas about life and service. So for me, I really enjoy that aspect of my role, how it's really connected to the community I live in and people's lives, from the moment they're kids to the elders here. It also helps that church jobs are better paid than a lot of college jobs, unfortunately. I think Susan is next.
Yes, you're making me want to have a church job again. I've never thought about it that way, and that's really beautiful. So I, as an editor at a music publisher, I really love that it fulfills both my creative side and my detail side. I really love music theory and have my master's degree in music theory. And I know I'm kind of strange that way. Some of you probably like it as well, but I love that I get to like dig into the music and actually make sure everything looks perfect and is notated perfectly and all of that stuff. But in the context of putting this creative stuff out into the world and thinking about what we're putting out each year and what is in that package, does it fulfill all of the levels and all the voicings and all of the subject matter and all of the diversity that we need to cover. So I super love that. I love obviously working with composers from all over the world and who are composing for all kinds of different people and different levels, and it's really handy because they teach me so much that then influences my own composing. So it's really nice how these things work together. When I look at other people's music or get to go and hear concerts or go to conferences, I get so inspired not only to put out the best music possible through Walton, but then also to compose better music and to stretch myself. And so I'm really grateful for that. I love to travel to conferences, KellyAnn, and so I'm excited you get to do that this summer, and hopefully I'll be there at Chorus America too. And getting to go to concerts and different music events is really great to have. I have my time in my office, and I get to also go out and travel and see people and do all of that. And I really look at my impact in my job as an editor as it's important that I have to make sure that I'm giving things to choirs that are telling an important story, like KellyAnn was talking about, or that are giving opportunities for social emotional learning, like Anthony was talking about. There's time to be silly and there's time to do music that's just wacky and crazy for being wacky and crazy. But I think, as we all know in our choral classrooms, it's a unique space to be able to touch on things that you can't really touch on when you're in math or whatever. Math is great, but you know what I mean. So to make sure that every piece of music that we put out at Walton is touching on something that is of importance and allows for the space to be opened up for those singers to have discussions, or for them to have something ingrained in their souls because of the music, have a text that then is a part of their body from that point on that they can bring back to them when they have a difficult time or when they need to hear those words again. So that's a constant challenge. And we still do put out silly music sometimes too. As a composer, I think that's exactly the thing I love the most about it, is when I'm really interested in texts that really matter and that are really different than what is already out in the world. And so I love working with poets and finding new texts that I can set to music, because then those texts, just like what I was saying, through the music are then embodied in people and they can come back to those when they need them.
Thank you, everyone. Well, I'm going to invite any of those of you who are watching on Zoom or on Facebook to chat us a question. We just have a last lightning round with our panelists, and panelists, I'm going to insist that we stick to 1 minute. So this will be a true lightning round here, to tell us anything else that maybe they haven't mentioned yet, or to share their most important career lesson. And while they're going, I invite you again to send us a question. So we'll start with you, Ahmed.
Well, there's a phrase some teachers use in music school that said, if you can imagine yourself doing something else, do that instead, because music's so hard. And I hated that. And for me, it's, if you can imagine yourself doing something else, do that too, because that's what's going to get you to a place that's authentic to you. And in the last year with pandemic, I've seen so many of my singers build careers out of that extra thing that they do and combine it with music in really cool, imaginative ways.
Thank you, Ahmed. That was cool. Mine would be, in my 27 years, honor and get along with your admin, your administration. I use the word honor specifically because try as best as you can to resist the temptation to speak negatively about your admin. Forge that relationship that they're always in your court, while your colleagues may be speaking bad. They never have anything negative to say about you, because you're going to need recommendations someday. So if you honor and get along with your admin, you'll always have opportunities of recommendations, and they'll always speak highly and kindly about you. So that's my tidbit.
Okay, I have a couple of things, but I'm starting the timer so I don't go over my time. Okay, every interaction with another person in the music field is important. You never know what the impression you leave on someone will lead to in the future, or what it won't lead to if it's not good. So just be kind. I've learned to listen more than I speak and to admit mistakes quickly. I've learned, kind of like Ahmed was talking about with his email situation, there aren't really any choral emergencies. So we can all just relax a little bit. And my last thing is that genuine kindness and a good solid character of person is always obvious. So make sure that you're being good and kind, because that's what we should all be doing, not just because you want to, get something from it.
I love all of this. I love this collection of good people. So mine, I think, just piggybacks on so many things that we're talking about. Your letter, your name has capital letters in it, but your title does not. You are not a conductor for life. You are not a teacher with a capital T. You can be many things, and you as a human are the most important part. And if you are willing to listen to yourself and acknowledge that humans grow and develop and change and learn, and that in fact you should grow and develop and learn and change as humans, as artists, as parents, as whatever it is that you're developing into, you are not letting down one of your other job titles. If you are not a ivory tower conductor who only is a conductor in its purest form, you can be a conductor who reaches people and raises money and is an editor and does cartwheels in fields. And that's a good thing because it honors you as a human and what you need. And I think that that's something that we often don't allow ourselves to do, to analyze us as the human and our own growth and development, and acknowledge that it's okay to do that, and in fact required for our field to move forward.
Thank you, everyone. That was really inspiring too. You all have highlighted how much resilience we've experienced and also expressed through the pandemic, and how much growth and development is an integral part, an ongoing part of the choral career. So thank you. Great. Well, I don't see any questions coming in. I think what I want to just say is a very big thank you to all of our panelists for your collective wisdom, for sharing with us from the heart, and for kind of growing our imaginations for what is possible in the field of choral music. So it's been a really inspiring session. I've said that a few times, but I'll say it again. It's been a very inspiring session. In fact, I made a bunch of notes. Thank you so much. And yes, we just really have enjoyed your presence. You've given me a lot of ideas too in my work with college students, and thinking through what types of programming would be really useful for young choral musicians. So that's been wonderful as well. All right, well, we'll say goodbye to everyone then. And again, thank you for joining us today. And we hope these conversations will continue. But panelists, thank you for your expertise. I really appreciate it.
Thank
Bye-bye,
you.
everyone.
Thanks, Caron. Thanks so much, Caron.